check and see the discussion. It's going to be a really exciting one today, I think. For those of you who are new, welcome to the Steering Committee for the Resilient Southwest Building Code Collaborative. My name is Leslie Ethan, and I kind of operate as a local project coordinator. The project managers for this collaborative are with New Buildings Institute. Tristan Grant is here, and you may have a couple of other folks joining. And this group really represents all the technical partners that are part of the collaborative, as well as the jurisdictions that kind of founded it by creating the idea of we need a regional resilience code for our communities here in the Southwest. So if you're new to this and I don't want to go into too much detail and take too much time from the meeting, but feel free to reach out to me if you'd like a little bit more background and information on the collaborative and what we're trying to do. And you can also check out our website. It's still a work in progress, but there's some information there at resilientsouthwest.org. So today's agenda is fairly straightforward. We've switched some things around. Tristan's not able to stay with us for the whole meeting. So we're going to start actually with our discussion item and then move into kind of next steps and status of the first phase, the budget period 1 deliverables, and then end with updates. So almost a little bit of a reverse there. And Tristan, did you have any slides for your part of it? I'm assuming you did.
I do not have slides, but I was just going to share my screen and pull some stuff up.
Okay, awesome. So Tristan's going to talk to you. He came in, what was it? February, right? And kind of talked conceptually kind of where NBI is thinking about with this regional resilience code. They've done some additional work, and so Tristan wants to come back with kind of that next level of detail and framework. And particularly for those of you who are involved in your community's building safety departments, really want to get your thoughts and input to make sure that this is all moving in the right direction and is going to work for everyone. So Tristan, take it away.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for the context. Oh, I'm in a big empty room and I've got a really funny echo just from the empty walls. Yeah, as Leslie said, over the past few months, we've been meeting with the TAG and really working to refine the scope and straw man outline of the Regional Resilience Code. We've been structuring that around resilience categories or hazard categories, and looking at the way that these hazards show up and occur in the region, what is in existing codes and what the existing codes are doing to respond to those, and areas where we can improve. And we've been going through that with the TAG. And one of the big challenges that we've been thinking about as we're going through this exercise of brainstorming what is going to go into this code is thinking about how we make a code that is that's tackling a range of resilience and hazard categories across a diverse region that has a lot of diversity in terms of climatic and weather exposure and hazard exposure, and also that is going to be used by this can be used by a lot of different jurisdictions with different priorities. And so we need to build some system into this code for customizing that. And that's a bit about what we want to, or that is what we want to get into today. And so, you know, the code at some level, either in the code or in some accompanying document, we want it to have guidance on local hazard exposure to help identify and prioritize the applicable code measures. We also want there to be transparency about why and how and when certain requirements are triggered and apply, and allow for customization based on that, and based on the jurisdictional priorities. So that's, yeah, thanks for pulling that, thanks for pulling that up. And that was the challenge, the intent, and that the last thing, what we're talking about this with you now, because the way that we think about how how the language of the code and how the code gets customized for different jurisdictions and localities will impact how we start to structure the format of the code and the language that goes into the code. So we have one idea for a way that this could work that we want to present and get feedback on. And based on that, we can go back to the drawing board, or we can refine that, or, reconfigure our approach to how the different requirements of this code could be customized for different localities. All righty. Kevin, do you want to pull up the matrix, or I've got it on my screen if you want me to pull it up? You're muted if you're saying anything. Okay, I'm going to pull it up. Okay, so what we have been thinking about and developing is a matrix that helps look at the different hazard categories. And maybe I should zoom out just a little bit more. The way that we've been thinking about the resilience and hazard categories is in terms of the hazard category, like extreme heat, and then code measure outcomes, which are inclusive of a number of code measures that contribute to one kind of outcome that helps alleviate the building or human stress due to that hazard or that resilience category. And so we've condensed all of the hazard categories and all of the code measure outcomes into this table. And we've looked at how we can tie local risk and local exposure to that hazard category into this table to identify to help identify and guide the code measures that should apply for that area. And so what this looks like for just as an example for Maricopa County is we looked at, and I'm going to go ahead and pull this up real quick. For most of these hazard categories, we use the FEMA National Risk Index, which is a FEMA resource that you can go into individual counties in the US and look at exposure to a number of hazards. And so we looked at the hazard in each of these hazards in Maricopa County and put that down in here. And so extreme heat, very high, extreme cold, very low, relatively high for outdoor air quality, wildfire, precipitation, flooding, water scarcity. And, this starts to help us understand in this county, what's the relative risk exposure to these different hazard categories. And in this column here, we put the number of code measures that we've brainstormed and discussed with the tag within that outcome. And so within that code measure outcome. And so as we start to use this or if we were to use this as a decision-making tool, this is one way that we could start to understand the level of stringency or the number of code measures that we may want a building in this area to comply with, if we think that is something that the resilience code should be tackling. And so if we were looking at translating this into from this relative risk analysis into the mandatory requirements, we just took basically spread these across like the number of measures across the range of risk exposure from very low to very high, And based on where this landed, we put that many measures are required in that code category based on that. And so I'll stop there for a second. That is, this is one framework that we wanted to bat around a little bit and chat on. I see Anthony's got his hand up.
Hey, Tristan. Just a question. It looks like it's organized by occupancy classifications.
That's right. Yeah, that's what we were thinking right now, so that you could, you could say, if you thought that actually it's not important for whatever a warehouse to comply with any of these, we don't care. Even though you might have very high risk exposure in this category, maybe it's not a priority for that building type to be resilient to a certain hazard. And so, yes, thanks for flagging that. We were thinking that this would or could be structured by occupancy category.
Yeah, and at first look, it looks like it reminded me of the IECC additional efficiency requirement tables that has is organized by occupancy classifications. Then it has different additional compliance options. Anyway, yeah, the table really helps. I think it's a great tool.
Yeah, we were also thinking, right, those energy credit tables are somewhat familiar with people, although they are a little polarizing depending on who you talk to. So that framework may or may not be, it at least should be familiar at some level. And but this is also something that can be, customized based on customized based on local priorities. So it's easy to override the, what our recommendations may be coming out of this code development process and say, actually, we don't want you to do anything for extreme cold. We don't think it's a priority. Or on the flip side, you could max out the credits, even if you're only a relatively low risk, because, say it's in academic setting, it's a school, we want schools to be really resilient. So even though it's only a relatively low or relatively moderate risk exposure, you require more of the credits. So yeah, thanks. Yeah, and Nina?
Hi, Tristan. What I'm thinking about in looking at this is just that my jurisdiction, Coconino County, is really big and has, I think it's 3 through 7 climate zones. And so we have like both the cold and the hot, and like some areas would be high wildfire and others wouldn't. And so I think what you were saying to Anthony is just that jurisdictions could, develop their own criteria in terms of what applies where is, but I just was wondering if you had any thoughts.
Yeah, so I guess my initial thought, or what one thought, the FEMA National Risk Index also allows you to go down to the census tract level. And so that could be one tool that you could use to help evaluate local risk across the hazard categories, and help folks understand their level of risk to different hazards and how how they should be interpreting and navigating the requirements. Obviously, that's we recognize that's a lot of work, both on like the design side for people to go in and look up the census tracts for every project and identify all of this to figure out how they need to comply with the code. It's also challenging from an enforcement perspective. So I, that's one of that's certainly one of the things we're grappling with is how do we make this, yeah, how do we balance this so that it's navigable for users and also for enforcement? So yeah, sorry, I don't have a great answer on that, but but that's good to flag. Thank you.
No, that's helpful with the census tracts. Thanks.
Leslie, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, some of at least one person on the call is having trouble seeing. Is there any way we could actually just get a copy of this to folks? So that might help just being able to see a little more easily firsthand, think through.
Yeah, let me see. Kevin, would you be able to print just this one page and send this out to the team so that people can follow along in real time?
Yeah, let me try to do that real quick.
And so we're especially interested to hear how, that the challenges that people think they would have in trying to customize this or enforce this or, work with project teams to see if they're complying with this. But also recognize that it's a lot to soak in. So we'll get that out. And if people have, have ideas later or questions or would like to find time to chat, we're always open for that.
I would encourage all of you who are representing jurisdictions and are particularly those of you with your building departments to, take a look at this, think about how you might use it, as Tristan said, or, is this structure workable for you? Do you have particular concerns? Because this is a really a key point where NBI, with the support of the tag, needs to really commit to a particular pathway. So if you do have concerns over this particular approach or have ideas for how it could be tweaked and made more, feasible for your community, please do share those.
Ideally, if something was adopted like this, is the intent when it comes to customizing for municipalities is that they would not really be changing necessarily categories or adding categories, but potentially taking out areas that may not be applicable and maybe changing like max measures on there? Or what would you kind of see them adjusting on here as part of them customizing this?
Yeah. I guess what we were trying to do with this is simplify modifications that would need to be made to the appendix. And so we're planning to structure the resilient code as an appendix. And what seems like it would be difficult and cumbersome is if every jurisdiction had to go through that appendix and figure out what to cut and what to include for them. And then also that that's challenging because then how do you know which of those requirements should apply to different building types? And the way that we write that ahead of time would be hard to make it flexible. And so this has kind of a built-in mechanism that jurisdictions could more easily adjust, in that you could have this table and you adjust the number of measures that a building occupancy type needs to comply with in each hazard category. And based on the number of measures that you require, there's some level of flexibility in how they comply with that resilience category. And so there's, you know, a relatively easy intervention point. If you want something to not apply for a building category, you zero all these out. If you want a building category to comply with everything, you max them out. And so that's kind of what we were thinking. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So you have recommendations on the required number of required measures, but municipalities could really have the flexibility to set that higher, lower, or at what you have there.
Yeah, right now I don't think we do have recommended the number of recommended measures. You know, at a very simple level, we could go from 0 to the maximum, from very low to very high, and just have a gradient there. I don't know if that's always appropriate, and for, you know, for some categories, there's only 1 or there's only 2 measures that exist in that outcome bundle. So I think that's going to be an ongoing conversation with the tag and with the project team. But I would expect that when we draft the code, we would have a recommended number of measures based on the hazard exposure for different building types. And so if a jurisdiction wanted to just wholesale adopt that and say, yeah, that looks good for us, they could. But there's also a built-in framework for understanding how we assigned that stringency within each hazard category, and they can go in and override that.
Yeah. No, I like it a lot, and I'm not a municipality, so take that with a grain of salt, but having that flexibility in there, because we have all different types of buildings, warehouses, offices, and we're also dealing with lots of different climate zones. We're dealing with lots of different things. Giving the municipalities who know their community best the flexibility to adjust this in an easy way, I think is golden. I think that's great. I really like that.
Leslie, is your hand back up?
Yeah, and you know, please keep in mind I'm not in any way, shape, an expert in this kind of thing. But I was just, as I'm listening to this, curious about. So you have, you know, your max measures. Do you at all envision that some of those measures would be more or less applicable depending on the climate zone? So there might be some additional level of guidance or variability in here that says, you know, rather than just, you know, if it's low risk, just do one measure, some other element of, if you're going to implement here, these are the better options for, you know, colder zones, these are the better options for warmer zones, or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We haven't thought about that and discussed that too much. I think we probably should have some sort of indication of priority based on the anticipated impact and benefit of the measures, or based on the impact to cost ratio of the measures. And it may also be that there are things that we just think are mandatory, or that we think should be mandatory, or that we would recommend be mandatory. So I think, yeah, both of those are considerations as we refine the approach to the code.
One of the things that we've discussed during some of the tag discussions is, because climate zones seem to come up as really important to make sure that it's flexible for that, is some areas may have, just like in the code, it would say exempt for climate zone 4 through 5 or exempt in this one. So I think there is opportunities to still be able to do that based on what climate zones you have.
And for those of you who would like to follow along with the matrix, Kevin's sent that out to everyone on the appointment. So if you can check your email and want to take a look at it, if you did not get it, let me know and I will make sure that you all get a copy of it.
Yeah, thanks for getting that out, Kevin. And I've got to run in just a few, but you know, we really appreciate everyone's time and you know, being here to review this. And as you have a chance to look into that more, if you have thoughts, questions, concerns, want to talk to us more about that, we'd really appreciate all the input as we're trying to refine this. So yeah, thanks. So I think I can happy to hand that back to you, Leslie.
All right, and I'm just getting it out to a few folks that were afforded the appointment and didn't get it directly. So great. Let's get back to our PowerPoint. Sorry, I've been making sure that email got through and got my files on my screen all out of wonk. All right. So I think Tristan's already jumped, but appreciate him kind of presenting this next level. Like I said, you should all have that matrix now. Please, you know, take a look at it, noodle over it. If there's anything that's of concern to you, please share those. You can email me directly, email Tristan, Kevin, and we'll make sure that the people that need to get those comments. So moving on with the agenda, we're going to now take a step back to kind of status updates. These next couple slides are covering those deliverables, DOE calls them milestones, that we've committed to getting done in this first phase, the budget period 1, which ends in September. So the project website is up and live finally. I put the link in the chat a little earlier, and please check it out. There is a member portal that we don't have fully stood up at this point, so I need to put some work into that. That will ultimately be where we post recordings from meetings, work products that you can comment on, final deliverables, things like that. So it'll be a nice one-stop shop for all of you to keep kind of tabs on where we are with the project and opportunities for engagement. Then speaking of engagement, we finally have a revised community engagement plan, and that's been submitted to Department of Energy. I'm going to drop that document and another one I'll get to in a minute into the chat. I'll email those out also when we send out the summary from this call. Take a look at it. It's a living document. It's going to continue to evolve, but I think it really sets a good baseline for the planned engagement for the rest of this project. That engagement plan will be implemented by Southwest Decision Resources, which is our key community partner, community engagement partner. If you have any specific questions about that, Brian Manwaring, who's on the call, is the point of contact. So if there's anything that stands out about it, if you want to take a look at it, feel free to email me or email Brian directly, either one. The end of March just ended the first quarter for 2025. And at that point, we had a deliverable to have at least MOUs in place with a minimum of 2 community-based organizations. The original plan was to have 4 entirely under contract. And while Southwest Decision Resources kind of is the kind of oversees the overall community engagement, these community-based organizations are intended to be resources for them to tap into that have more direct on the ground connections and work within specific communities. So we really were looking to organizations, one that have been a part of this effort since the beginning. We had a number that actually signed letters of commitment along with the application, but also organizations with a track record working with our partner jurisdictions. So SERI represents Southern Arizona. They have a really great record of work with the city of Tucson, a lot of work in kind of the health of home space. Unlimited Potential is another organization up in Central Valley. And they were recommended by a number of the jurisdictional partners up there, Tempe, Mesa. They've done a huge amount of work with Phoenix. Their work's a little larger scale and kind of branches into broader issues around the built environment, such as, mobility and things like that. And then City of Albuquerque recommended a fantastic organization there in New Mexico, United South Broadway. We do not have them under MOU at this point because we just needed the 2. But they're another one that does a lot of work really in the healthy home space and helping people avoid eviction, things like that. And then we're still working to get one representing Northern Arizona so that we have these organizations really well spaced throughout the geography of the project. And then closing out kind of the first half of this year, end of June, the final deliverable for that period is getting the surveys and interview results consolidated. The surveys, you may recall, we did late last year. Illume's now in the process of doing those interviews. We are still trying to find a couple more jurisdictions to tap. We're working on getting Santa Fe and Phoenix interviews, and then trying to get another 2 Arizona jurisdictions. The results of all of that will come back to you in June. And recall, those surveys and interviews are really intended to better understand what the challenges are around energy code adoption and implementation and the kinds of resources and support that jurisdictions would need in order to overcome some of those challenges. Some of that will help us refine the outcomes, future outcomes of this project. Some of that is beyond the scope of what we're trying to do. And so those things will be communicated to our state energy offices and other entities as like, here's some opportunities if you have resources and interest in supporting in this space, some things that you can do to help jurisdictions, with energy code adoption and implementation. So since we got a good group of those of you with building departments on the call, here's the list of groups that we've had that have done interviews and or surveys. And so we've got a pretty good group here. Certainly, especially if we can get Santa Fe, New Mexico will be pretty well represented, particularly because we got the state construction industry division, which implements, because they do building codes at the state level. We've got a couple of for-profit firms that do a lot of work with jurisdictions, and so that they can kind of give a broader perspective. If you have thoughts on a couple of other Arizona building safety departments that we could tap into, particularly if they're ones you have a relationship with and can help us get them connected, please let me know. You can throw it in the chat, or you can send me an email, and that'll be really helpful, kind of closing that piece out. And I'm seeing some folks are having trouble accessing the portal. So yeah, we will send out, definitely make sure everybody has the materials from today and access to the slides and recording and everything. All right, moving on. So those are things that have to get done by the end of June or have been done. This next one really are things that are kind of ongoing in the project that need to be done by the end of September. So the IECC training, the virtual part of that, is underway. If you want to sign up for that, or you want to pass that along to others, there's, and I'll send the slide deck out. There is a list of at least the first, I think it's the first 9 are posted on there, and then we'll continue to add to it. There'll be 13 total. The first 2 are complete. We don't have recordings posted yet, hoping to do that. But this will allow folks to register for the upcoming virtual trainings. We are planning on, so the virtual is everyone's welcome, you know, whether it's you're with a building department or private industry consultants, you know, everyone's welcome to attend those. There are 3 in-person ones that are planned. We're looking at doing those later in this budget period. And those will really be focused on building department staff. That was, when we were planning this, that was the request to have something a little more hands-on, focused on both plan review and inspection of energy codes. The EAP, the Equity Advisory Panel, and the Technical Advisory Group are continuing to meet. Both met in late March. Summaries of those meetings will be available shortly. They're both meeting again in early May. We're on Monday planning out the agenda for the EAP. There's a draft agenda for the Technical Advisory Group. In addition to kind of these primary meetings, MBI has been doing weekly deep dives with the TAG on particular topics. And so, you know, there's transcripts available for those. So if you're interested in either sitting in on the meetings or just seeing the conversation that's happening, just a reminder that Technical Advisory Group is really helping inform like the technical aspects of what's going to go into the resilience code. And the Equity Advisory Panel's role is really to provide an equity lens to that, to make sure that we're not causing unintended consequences or further exacerbating disparities for marginalized groups. As these meetings are happening, there's a scoping report that is capturing all of that input. So even if you don't have the time and don't want to sit in on the meetings, that scoping report, I also put in the chat, that captures meetings through January. So it doesn't yet have the March meetings or the weekly deep dives that have been happening since then. That'll get incorporated hopefully shortly. But this is really intended to, for those who don't want to sit on those meetings, summarize and help show how the input from both of those groups is being integrated and helping drive the development of the regional resilience code. And then the last kind of ongoing thing that we have between now and September is a commitment for at least 3 community engagement sessions. And Southwest Decision Resources will lead that. We're going to start getting the planning going on that shortly. So we may be reaching out with specific asks for helping us figure out how to connect with the appropriate stakeholders in your community. And but we're planning on having those a little later in the in this budget period. So probably a little closer to September, post summer. Give us a little time to really be thoughtful in how we want to do those, and also have something a little more substantive in terms of like a framework or a scope for the code that we can share with folks. And then, as I said, the first phase of this project ends in September. So the final kind of 4 deliverables at that point is we will have to deliver a scope for the resilience code, and the work plan refers to program packages that includes the net zero roadmap that kind of is the piece that goes beyond the code itself. And so again, please take a look at the matrix that Kevin sent out and provide comments, because we really need to get the overall structure and approach for that resilience code hammered out in advance so that we can get it to DOE by the end of September. There's also an assessment report that will capture the surveys and the interviews and other things, and kind of is it capturing that sense of like, what are the challenges to energy code adoption within this region? Where are there opportunities to improve that and support that? And perhaps even ideas about how some of that could be supported or funded. And so MBI and Tucson are going to start an outline on that. Hopefully that is something that we will be able to share. The surveys are coming in June, so this would probably be more like the July timeframe with you all. Then we also, in addition to the resilience code and the roadmap, there is also implementation resources. We're referring to it as an implementation guide, although it's more of a website that will have implementation resources. And so Institute for Energy Solutions has a draft framework. They presented it to the core team last week, so it's really solid. Julia, who's the postdoc who's leading this, is traveling today, so we're gonna push having that framework presented to you to May. So look for that. This is another one for those of you in the building departments, having your input, having your thoughts on that framework. Are there things that are missing? Are there additional opportunities? Will be really helpful. And then the final piece for this phase of the project is starting to develop some career marketing messages that are aimed at both just increasing people going into building construction, building industry career pathways. We all know that the tight labor market is part of what's exacerbating housing affordability, and just having a good workforce in this area is key. But also, how do we increase diversity in that space? There's a lot of opportunity there. So this is really kind of the overview of what we need to get done by, again, the end of September, which is the end of the first phase. At the end of that phase is what DOE calls a go, no go decision point. So they'll evaluate everything that we've done and give us either a thumbs up to continue with the project or not. But we're really hopeful. Everything's developing really well, and we're staying on track despite the delay and getting our initial paperwork and despite all the current uncertainty, the project's really moving well. Kevin, did you want to add anything more about project deliverables at this point?
No, I think just repeat what you said, and I think even with the communication pause still continuing from DOE, the momentum on the project is still continuing, and we know the current budget period that we have funding for goes through the end of September at the very least. So we're just pushing things forward, and I think we're making good progress despite the communications pause and some of the challenges there.
And that is a good